For a quarter of a century now, Lara Croft has been raiding tombs across generations of consoles and graphics card release cycles. Tomb Raider has stood the test of time and managed to see itself through where most fail, a successful reboot. In 2013, the world was treated to one of the best franchise reboots of all time, ultimately culminating in an epic finale in 2018 with Shadow of the Tomb Raider. What's wild about this particular game is that the developers Eidos Montreal and Nixxes Software didn't just sleep on the release. They've been updating it constantly with new features, the latest being DLSS 2.0 support. It's not often that we get to see a game update DLSS modes, so that's what I'm excited to dig into today. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was released on September 12, 2018, and that was quite close to the initial release cycle of the RTX 2000 series. This was a significant time frame as Shadow of the Tomb Raider was one of the games touted by Nvidia as being RTX ready. It featured next-gen features such as ray trace shadows, as well as the initial outing of deep learning super sampling, or DLSS for short. The problem was, it wasn't ready for the game's launch, nor was the performance looking too great according to leaks and early sources. In March of 2019, 6 months following the initial release of the game, the much anticipated update released and fulfilled those early promises. Ray Trace Shadows and DLSS was here. While the Ray Trace Shadows were a point of argument in regards to the efficacy, the real issue lay within the image quality of DLSS and if they changed the gameplay. Yes, it increased performance, but had some odd limitations regarding which graphics cards were used at what resolutions, and it was indeed quite blurry. That was the unfortunate reality of DLSS 1.0. Since then, we've seen massive updates to DLSS algorithm, and it's now past its 2.0 revision and has been rather well received so far. So, what happens when they decide to teach an old dog new tricks? That's right, Shadow of the Tomb Raider has recently been updated to support DLSS 2.0, and we get a rare insight on how much that changes things. From performance to visuals, this update is welcome and warranted. Sure, many of us have already played through the game, twice in my case thanks to the new Game Plus feature. But there's nothing wrong with cleaning up a great game and allowing for better performance and visuals for those diving in today. Now normally we would go into the image quality and then talk about performance, but this time we're going to shift things up and we're going to go with performance numbers out of the way first. Now I did all of the testing of the DLSS 1.0 implementation before the update dropped, so in all transparency, those results are obviously on a different version of the game, but still very much valid. So running on my test bench with a Ryzen 9 3900X and a GeForce RTX 3080 Founders Edition at UHD 4K, we get really interesting results with settings maxed out, including Ray Trace Shadows on Ultra. Now I've included native performance along with Ray Trace Shadows and no DLSS for comparison's sake. But you can see in the performance results here that every option of the new DLSS 2.0 update outperforms the old and less attractive DLSS 1.0 originally used. In fact, we'll look at it shortly, but DLSS Performance Mode, which I rarely ever suggest using, is on par with the original DLSS implementation's visual and delivers a massive 38% performance improvement. Even DLSS quality brings the performance back within 10% of how the game performed with no ray tracing. And when it's that close, why not just turn on the pretties and enjoy them when they do matter the most? And because DLSS Quality Mode actually performs better than DLSS 1.0, I'm going to use that for the baseline comparisons when looking at the image quality between the old and the new versions. Is that unfair? Not really, since the performance is now better and there's not much of a reason to lower the quality unless you want to run a higher resolution with a lower end graphics card, but that's a different story. But first, how do they both stack up when compared against the native image? Well, I'll start with the original DLSS implementation in the scene from the village. Now, this scene actually showcases the original version of DLSS better than you might remember, but there are some quite clear detriments to the image quality. You're going to have to look in the distance to see them, but it's not that hard. The temple in the distance shows considerably better image quality in the DLSS quality options. even over native in my opinion. Also, take note of the birds flying at the top right of each section. They now look fantastic with the removal of motion blur commonly associated with the older methods of DLSS. There is, however, one thing to point out, and that's going to be the tree canopy just under that temple. The native render is the only one to not have any artifacts here, as both the old and new DLSS exhibit a level of detail bias issue here. But it's one of those things that you'll have to be pixel peeping to see while playing the game. Moving to the Peruvian village, we see another clear example of the improvements made by DLSS 2.0. Sure, Lara is missing her bow in that DLSS 2.0 quality section, but that was on me for not equipping it when reloading the new update. You can easily see the tassels from her garment and detail of her rope are much more defined in the new DLSS quality setting. The real kicker comes in the foliage. The leaves and branches are even more defined in the DLSS quality shots, where both the native and DLSS 1.0 images suffer from TAA blur that causes one segment of a branch to seemingly float in the air. Now the next side-by-side we're going to look at is with the game in motion. Well, with the built-in benchmark in motion anyway. But here the points still stand. As a common critique of DLSS is the motion blur is introduced when the game is moving rather than standing still. Now feel free to pause the video at any time and try to get a good look. If you do, you'll find the DLSS 2.0 quality to be miles ahead of DLSS 1.0 and at times an improvement over the native render, with some of the background elements being a tad sharper. Now let's take one last quick look at the village and see how things compare when running the performance option. Overall, I would say that these are very similar image quality, with the performance still edging it out. That's because some of the distant details are still sharper, and the blur around moving objects like the birds is gone. Now the big kicker here is the performance jump from 74 frames per second to over 100. Similar image quality, but way more performance? I don't know anyone who would complain about that. So it does look like you can teach an old dog new tricks. There haven't been many chances to get a look at DLSS updates for a game that's already been released. While Metro Exodus got a massive upgrade, it was done through an entirely new version of the game. This, however, is replacing the old with the new in the same game. While it's still up for debate on the efficacy of how ray trace shadows are used in the games, I think it ends the debate on the improvements made with DLSS. With this update, you can now run Shadow of the Tomb Raider with all of the settings cranked up, including ray tracing and enabling DLSS without the dreaded smear you would have had in the past. It's really cool to see that even DLSS performance matches the image quality of DLSS 1.0. And for those who don't mind lowering settings, they'll be greeted to a massive performance boost unlike anything this game has seen before. And with that, I want to thank all of you for joining me on this adventure back to the Peruvian jungle with the Tomb Raider herself. This was a quick look at how the DLSS 2.0 update was able to impact the visual fidelity of Shadow of the Tomb Raider and a rare treat test. Let me know if you enjoyed it by hitting that like button, and make sure you're subscribed here at PCWorld for even more PC hardware and software goodness.